The Liberty lineup. This is the Naked True segment. This has been McClintock with Enoch Moore. And we have a very special debate between the candidates again for Senate District 23. And we are joined with Sherilyn Eager, who's going to help us do with the moderation. She's another one of the hosts here on the Liberty lineup. Again, it's the candidates here with Senate District 23 are Todd Weiler and Heather Gardner. Appreciate the both of you coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Sherilyn and Todd, do we have you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, I am here. And I certainly want to thank our candidates for being here with us today. And we're going to be addressing some important topics and issues and asking questions on a broad base of issues. And of course, none the least of which is education, because that is the bulk of our legislative budget, and many issues come across the desks of our senators and House members. And so we might start off with, first of all, both of our candidates giving an opening statement and introduce themselves to the audience, and then we will get into the issues one question at a time. So with that in mind, Senator Weiler, you're our incumbent. If you would start off and then challenger Heather Gardner.
Yeah, great, thanks. I'm Todd Weiler. I live in Woods Cross. I've been a state senator since 2012, and I'm running for my second full term. I entered the state senate in January of 2012 after Dan Lillianquist resigned to run against Orrin Hatch, and I was elected to my own four-year term in November of that year. So I went through the delegate caucus selection process twice in 2012 and came out on top both times, and I'm doing that same convention delegate process again this year. And because my Senate district, Senate District 23, crosses into Salt Lake County, we're a state delegate race. During my 4 years in the state Senate, I have tried to be a champion of the Constitution. I've run several bills to protect our privacy rights under the Fourth Amendment, and I ran an important bill this year to protect Sixth Amendment rights, which I learned were being violated left and right in the state of Utah. And we're taking a very aggressive approach to making sure that our Sixth Amendment rights are protected. I've also voted in favor of the Second Amendment on every occasion that I've had, and I look forward to this debate. So thank you, Sherilyn, thank you, Enoch, and thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, Heather Gardner.
Yes, I'm Heather Gardner. I'm running for State Senate 23, and I've been a citizen lobbyist up on Capitol Hill for many years on my own time and my own dime, and working really on the issues that are most important to the constituents in our area and the state. I've also just resigned as the vice chair of the Davis County Republican Party. I was elected to that position, ran off the floor. Also have been elected as a county and state delegate through our neighborhood caucuses. And my degree is in psychology. I worked in the social work field in Utah, in both Utah County and Salt Lake County, for DCFS, as well as doing drug and alcohol counseling, private probation provider, domestic violence resources, crime victims advocacy, and rape crisis team member for over 6 years. As far as what issues I've worked the most on, I've spent time up at the legislature and have testified on several bills, have been a proponent for amendments to the state school board election process, educational testing amendments. I've also lobbied very strongly for our Fourth Amendment privacy rights, and I gave an interim committee presentation on data collection and parental rights to the Utah legislature. I've worked on student privacy amendments as well as teacher salary supplement program amendments, and I really have tried to focus on making sure that government stays within its proper role.
All right, thank you. So Todd Weiler, Heather Gardner, let's get right into the first topic that I mentioned. We were going to cover which is education. And there are numerous bills and different aspects of education in Utah. Parents, of course, have been most concerned about the Common Core standards, and I would like to hear first from Heather. We'll alternate back and forth who goes first on these, if that's okay with both of you. And so, Heather, let's hear from you first on your position on Common Core standards.
Okay. Common Core standards have been adopted in the state of Utah, and my concern is not so much that we have standards. My concern is with the whole education package that we have rolling out. Here in Utah, we got $9 million to set up a database that's a statewide longitudinal database system. And the federal government has a data schematic for that, which includes about 500 data points for our children. That's a lot of data being collected. And as well, I'm really concerned about the Common Core alignment that's going on that makes it hard for charter schools or homeschools to actually be independent. A lot of charter schools started up, for instance, using Saxon math as a method of teaching, and now they're being forced to align to the tests, the Common Core SAGE test, and are not allowed to be independent, truly independent. This, to me, Common Core is not just standards, it's part of a larger reform package that's rolling out, and the enforcement mechanisms have been testing, data collection, and accountability measures. I've been concerned because of complaints that I've heard from teachers and constituents in our area. The teachers are telling me they don't have flexibility in the classroom like they used to, that they've had to teach to the tests, that they're seeing increased anxiety in students centered around this inflexibility. And I've also heard from teachers that the standards are a really good idea, but the implementation was not so great, and that the students are the ones who are suffering.
Okay, Mr. Weiler.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, the first thing I did to become a state senator was I raised my right hand to the square, and I took an oath to uphold the Utah Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. And when I take an oath, I take that seriously. Part of the Utah Constitution is Article 10, Section 3, and it says that the general control and supervision of public education system shall be vested in the State Board of Education. And I think it's important to remember that the same Utah Constitution that created the legislature also created the State Board of Education. There are 15 members of that board. They each represent over 200,000 people, and they are elected through a process that has been defective, and that's a process that we fixed in the legislature finally this year. And I've been pushing to fix that process since the day I became a state senator, and it took us, unfortunately, too long to reach a consensus. Now, the reason I start off with that is because the state school board, not the legislature, not the governor, is the body that is over things like standards and curriculum and testing. And the state school board got us into Common Core, and yes, Governor Herbert signed off on that. The legislature never voted on it. And if the state school board were to vote tomorrow to opt us out of Common Core, I would support that because that's a decision that they should make. What I care about the most is local control over standards, curriculum, and testing. And the same questions that Jonathan Johnson and others have been asking about Common Core during this election cycle were raised in 2014 during that election cycle, and also in 2012. When I first ran for Dan Lillenquist's seat in December of 2011, I was being asked about Common Core, the same questions that are being asked today. And I'm grateful that our Attorney General took 4 months to look into those same questions, and in 2014, on October 7th, he issued a 7-page memorandum. If you Google Reyes Common Core, you can read this memorandum for yourself. And he found that by adopting Common Core, Utah has not ceded authority over standards and curriculum, and that our local school boards still control their curriculum, and that there are not any outside partnerships or programs that have indirect control of Utah curriculum. And I trust Sean Reyes. I trust the research that he did. He also found that there were no federal entanglements with respect to Utah curriculum, and that Utah did not receive money to adopt Common Core standards. We did apply the state school board did apply for a race to the top grant, but that grant was not awarded. So I support local control of education. I'm not convinced that we've ceded that, and I will support the state school board's future decisions regarding whether we stay in or opt out of Common Core.
Okay, thank you. Enoch, do we have time for a quick follow-up question before the break?
Nope.
Sure, we've got 30 seconds to the break.
Well, that's
30
not
seconds. Let's take that time to just queue up what the questions will be coming up after the break, then, if we can.
Yeah.
And we want to get into the area specifically of privacy and rights of parents and families in education. Also, what does local control look like specifically? If you would support the partisan election of school boards, and we will then get into areas of choices in education. And so that's going to be coming up after the break. We are here with Senator Todd Weiler and challenger Heather Gardner, running for state senate in Davis County. And which district is it again?
20.
20. So,
23.
yes, go ahead, Enoch.
This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore with Sherilyn Eager. We are moderating the debate between the Senate District candidates for Senate District 23, Todd Weiler and Heather Gardner. We'll go ahead and turn that back over to you, Sherilyn.
Thank you. Yes, we are on the topic of education. And as a follow-up, both support, as I understand, the concept of local control. And so now we need to look specifically at why there is a problem in the state with the Office of Education and our state school board. I'd like to specifically ask questions regarding those two and how we can resolve the problem of an unaccountable state Office of Education and school boards. Do you support partisan elections? And how can we bring the Office of Education into a check and balance? Let's start with Senator Weiler.
Yes, I have voted already this year, and we've passed a bill that will bring, for the first time in Utah history, partisan school board elections to the state. I also supported a bill last year that would have also brought partisan school board elections. That unfortunately failed. But we've already done that, and I'm already on record supporting that. When I was first elected, when I first took office in 2012, the State Office of Education, in my opinion, was completely out of control. And I think there have been dramatic improvements in the last 4 years, not only with the State Office of Education, but also with the State School Board with some of the changes. And I think we'll continue to see those improvements. In fact, this past year, the 2016 general session, I think reached a new high water mark for cooperation between the state school board and the legislature. I think we are mostly on the same page now, which is a dramatic change from just 4.5 years ago. Now, with local control and accountability, we have school board elections, and I think because they haven't been partisan, they've often been overlooked. And I think bringing them into the Republican and Democratic fold will bring some more transparency and accountability to those processes. Most people that I talk to do not know the name of their state school board and their local school board representatives. And I think, a lot of those issues are being made at the local level. I don't want to, as a state senator, I don't want to be picking which textbooks your kids are using in second grade. I think that should be done by the local school district. And it may be different in Davis County, where I live, than in Juab County or in San Juan County. And I'm okay with that. But somebody ought to be reading those textbooks and making sure that they're not full of liberal agendas and other things like that. But that, I believe, should be done at the most local level. So when I talk about local control, that's me not picking textbooks for people in Juab and San Juan counties. That's their local school board officials doing that.
All right. Heather Gardner.
So, in answer to your first question, I absolutely am in support of partisan school board elections. In fact, I've spent the last couple of years making sure that I'm lobbying and testifying on those bills that are in support of partisan school board elections. I ran for state school board in 2014, and there were 17 people that flooded the seat that I was running for. There was a big interest in overturning some of the state school board members. And in that process, I realized how unfortunate it is that the state school board elections ran through a selection committee. Basically, we were handed a questionnaire that we emailed back to a committee that chose who they wanted to come in and interview, and then the governor picked 2 people to go on the ballot. Well, in the process of this, the state school board selection was ruled unconstitutional by a federal judge. And 3 of the candidates' petition were put back on the ballot. And I actually went without an attorney on my own down to the federal courthouse, looked up their cases, and petitioned the court so that all 40 of the candidates who were left off the ballot when it was ruled unconstitutional would be placed back on, and the judge did not hear my petition. So I am very much in favor of partisan school board elections. I feel like it adds to accountability and transparency, as well as allowing the Republican Party to help vet the candidates and give them opportunities to speak and debate, as well as get voter information. Local control is a whole other issue. I really feel like parents and taxpayers have the most influence, need to have the most influence, and we need to uphold the principles of taxation with representation. We need to decentralize education. We need to have freedom of religion, freedom of association, and the right to remain secure in our papers, which would include homework and data. So absolutely, for me, local control boils down to devolving the control down to the smallest denominator. In the state constitution, the Constitution of the United States, it says that parents have the primary role and responsibility for the education of their children, and that the state should be secondary in that role. As well, I think teachers and local LEAs and local school districts need to be the one making the most important decisions about what happens in their classroom. So I want to see us decentralizing education instead of taking mandates or suggestions from a federal government official like a Secretary of Education or from the Utah State Office of Education or even from the board. I would like to see LEAs making those important decisions for their own schools.
Okay, Heather, beginning with you on this question. It is the question of parental choices, and there are parents who choose private, public, or homeschool. What are your thoughts on that, and how would you improve the choices? And so Heather Gardner first.
Okay. My mother was a public school teacher. That's what she did the majority of her life. And so I grew up thinking I would absolutely public school my children, and I didn't really look at any other options. So I started my children out in a public school preschool and public early intervention programs because I had some children with special needs. And what I found from the very beginning is that each of my children was completely unique and individual, and that what fit for one of my 5 children didn't necessarily fit for the other children. So we went through a process of public school, and we ran into a glitch last year when my daughter struggled with one of the books that she was reading in her classroom, and the school refused to give her an alternate assignment. So last year was the first year that I did a dual enrollment homeschool track where I would pull her out during reading and go back to public school. From there, we tried private school, where I was a teacher already at a private school, and we enjoyed that, but I felt like the best option for my children this year was full homeschooling. So that is what I am doing. I absolutely believe in the Republican platform that says that parents have a right to choose the education that is best for their children, whether it's charter, private, public, or homeschooling, and that parents know best what their children need. there are several legislators up at Capitol Hill that homeschool their children. I know Mark Roberts, Jake Anderegg, Senator Madsen have all been involved at one point or another in homeschooling their children. So there's a stigma that goes with it, but I feel like we don't need to be fighting against each other over what's best, because parents know best, whether it's public, charter, or private.
Okay, Senator Weiler.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of what Heather just said. I like the fact, and I will continue to stand up and fight for the right for parents to choose private school, homeschool, charter school, district schools, and or a combination of the same. And with some of the online options right now, I like the fact that, and Heather's not the only state delegate in my race that's doing kind of a dual homeschool track. I was visiting with one last night that liked the option of having her kids go to school. In the past, they've gone to school like 2 days a week and then homeschooled the other 3 days. And I if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, I'm going to continue to look for ways that we can try to carve out some exceptions for parents who are diligently homeschooling their students. One of the conversations I had last night, she said that, her younger kids like to focus on some other subjects, and then they may do 3 years of math when they get, 12 or 13 years old. And she's, her philosophy as a parent was, as long as they're up to speed by the time, they're 17, what difference does it make what order it goes? And I tend to agree with her. And so I think we need to find a way for some more flexibility in our testing and other things and our standards to allow a diligent homeschooling parent to have the flexibility to tailor make the needs for their child. And with regard to Heather's children, who I don't know, I've met a few of them. We do have IEP available in public schools, an individual education plan, and that's a matter that can be used to address students' needs. But I agree, every student is different, and we need to do the best job we can as a state to tailor make our education for the best suited for each student.
Thank you both on the topic of education. We are going to switch now to healthcare. As you both probably know, the Affordable Care Act is in place, and one of the legs of implementing that is the area of Medicaid expansion. Senator Weiler, if you would address this first on your support of Medicaid expansion, and then Heather, if you would follow up on what your position might be.
Yes, thank you. So at the beginning of our 2015 session in January of last year, I was able to visit with Mike Lee and Mia Love and Jason Chaffetz, all when they came to the Senate to speak to us at the beginning of the session. And they all told me the same thing, and this was very discouraging to me. They said during the next 2 years, because the Congress runs in 2-year sessions, and so they were just beginning the session after the 2014 elections. They said in the next 2 years there will be no meaningful effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. And with that information, it's discouraging because I did not support the ACA. I didn't want Congress to pass it. I was disturbed that they cheated with the reconciliation rules to pass it. I wanted the Supreme Court to overturn it, and I was disturbed as a lawyer with the legal gymnastics that Justice Roberts and others went through to uphold it. And I voted and actively campaigned for Mitt Romney, hoping that he would be able to, as president, use his bully pulpit to get the ACA repealed and replaced. And 3 strikes, I was out. And the status quo is now we're paying in Utah over $900 million in new ACA taxes this year, and it's gone up every year for the past 3 years, and we're not getting the benefit of those taxes. We're just shipping that money off. And we have about 144,000 Utahns who, instead of being on health care, they're going to our emergency rooms and running up our insurance rates and our medical costs. They're going to jail where we spend $35,000 a year to house them down at the point of the mountain, and they get free health care. And we have a coverage gap, a donut hole, that was created when the Supreme Court struck down part of the ACA, but not all of it. And so with the knowledge that we are paying the taxes, we can't opt out of the taxes, and that Congress was going to wait to see if we got a Republican in the White House, I did support, and I thought it was a reasonable effort to support Healthy Utah. the governor negotiated in his office some very valuable waivers from the Department of Health that would have just been enacted for 2 years and then evaporated on its own. That's what the Healthy Utah plan did in 2015. I think it was a responsible approach to the cards that we had been dealt. And because our citizens are paying the taxes, and we're paying double because we're paying for the ACA taxes and we're paying for the increased charges from emergency room and prison, and I don't believe that's fair to the taxpayer to pay double for those same charges.
All right, we have 3 minutes to the break. Heather, if you would take your 2 minutes on this, and then the last segment of this debate, we will do some shotgun questions for both of you on a variety of the remaining issues. So Heather, your response to how you would have reacted to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion.
I'm absolutely against expanding Medicaid any further than we already have. Reason being, my husband is a healthcare provider. He owns his own business doing physical therapy. And what he has seen since Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act, as well as Medicaid expansion here in the state of Utah, has been that the quality of care he's able to give has gone down, that they spend so much time filling out paperwork and having to, I guess you would say, work with the government mandates, that the visits he was able to do, 6 to 10 visits per patient, have gone down to 0. And he said that we are really targeting the people who need it the most, which are the disabled, the pregnant mothers, the people that we are starting to take these accommodations away from as we're expanding Medicaid. Not only that, but the cost of Medicaid expansion. In more than half of the states who have tried to expand Medicaid, they've seen the costs go out of control. We've seen it in Arkansas, we've seen it in Colorado, where 1 in 5 adults are now on Medicaid, and we've seen it in Illinois. And I would encourage people to research out the Affordable Care Act. I am not in favor of expanding government beyond its role here in the state of Utah.
All right, this is a question that deals with surveys and from different organizations, and we'll start with Heather. Your opponent has a 100% rating in 2014 from Planned Parenthood, and Todd will let you respond to that, whereas the Utah taxpayers shows Senator Weiler at 91%. The American Conservative Union has Senator Weiler at 63% and Grassroots at 36%. Those are just, broad, different range of issues, and some are broad-based and some are, of course, single issues. Let's start with Heather on where you would stand on some of these surveys.
Sherilyn, we need to do that after the break. We've got about 15
seconds. It gives
seconds.
you both time to think on that, and we hope our listeners will stick around for the answers. And in the studio there, we have Enoch Moore, who's at the controls. And Ben, talk a little bit about your show.
We've gone out to the break. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore with Sherilyn Eager. We are having our debate with the candidates for Senate District 23, Todd Weiler and Heather Gardner, that's Senate District 23. And we'll be back with those questions that Sherilyn was mentioning before about their voting records, and we'll be back right after the break. Our Facebook page, the Liberty Lineup Radio Show, and we are having our debate with the candidates for Senate District 23, Todd Weiler and Heather Gardner. And we were right before the break, we were talking about some of the voting records of several different organizations. We'll turn that back over to you, Sherilyn.
Thank you so much. Before the break began, decided that we are going to do more shotgun questions this segment. And the first is the different scorecards of different organizations. Some are single issue, some are multi-issue. And I think are we starting with you, Senator? Forgive me, I forgot where we.
I think so.
Okay, so yes, and so we're looking at a variety of them. Planned Parenthood in 2014 didn't like you so much, Senator Weiler, 100%. But it's all over the map there. So you can address that. The Utah Taxpayers Association, 91%. That's a good rating. And then the American Conservative Union, 63%. Grassroots, 35%. So let's talk about how you respond to those ratings, and then we'll hear from Heather Gardner on what her ratings would be if elected.
Well, I don't think anyone knows, can speculate what the ratings are going to be. I've never seen the Planned Parenthood scorecard. I had no idea. They gave me an A last year. I guess I should be proud of that. I'm not. Let me tell you, I got into, I certainly didn't get an A this year because we had no abortion legislation last year, so I don't know what they were tracking. But this year I vigorously supported Senator Bramble's bill that would require anesthesia to the fetus if there's an abortion performed in Utah after 20 months. And I was very aggressive in our Senate Business and Labor Committee, and Planned Parenthood went after me. Kate Kelly from Ordained Women is now one of Planned Parenthood's lobbyists, and they were calling me out with very anti-Mormon, vile things on Twitter and Facebook. So, there's about 15 different organizations that rate legislators, and I just hope your listeners understand this session. I had to vote on or consider over 900 bills, and a scorecard will typically pick 12 to 15 of them. And as I've read through some of the scorecards, it's clear to me that the authors of the scorecards either haven't read the bills that they're rating me on or don't understand the bills. And so, anyways, that's my take.
Okay.
Heather Gardner.
My take on the scorecards, I've read through the scorecards. In addressing Planned Parenthood, I would definitely, they would not be fond of me. In fact, I had to laugh when Senator Weiler said that Kate Kelly had been tweeting him because she had also tweeted me when I was lobbying against the comprehensive sex ed bill up on Capitol Hill, HB 246, and Planned Parenthood was definitely in favor of that bill. As far as abortion goes, I feel like we should be banning abortion, period, after 20 weeks. There's no reason we should even be performing abortions past that time. I am very pro-life, so I know that's how I would score on that. Libertas is another rating that basically rates liberty, and grassroots is based on conservative Republican values, but I agree you need to look at the actual bill and look at how your senator or legislator voted on that. You can look at that under Vote Smart, and you can also look on my website under electheathergardner.com. I have some resources listed for vetting candidates, and I've listed many of the scorecards there.
All right, let's specifically go to one bill that Grassroots has highlighted. This is HB 377. And Heather, this has to do with the protection of the rights of families to provide that a grandparent may petition for visitation after a parent's rights have been terminated unless the grandchild is adopted by a non-relative. And Senator Weiler, you can respond to this as well. But Heather, how would you have voted on that? Senator Weiler voted against that.
Which bill was that?
HB 377, this is the one to protect the rights of families to provide that a grandparent can petition for visitation after parental rights have been terminated.
Well, I am all for parental rights. However, I will say that as a former child protective service worker, I've seen some grandparents that definitely would not be good with doing visitation because they were either involved in the abuse or had some sort of history of being a perpetrator themselves. So I would have some real concerns in cases like that. However, I have seen cases and bills on parental rights that I feel like we really need to protect parental rights and fight against terminating it in all cases unless there's really severe abuse. So I would have to agree that in some cases grandparents should not be visiting their grandchildren when parental rights have been terminated. That needs to be looked at really carefully.
Senator Weiler.
Thank you. I agree with Heather. This is a bill, and I spoke against it this year and the prior 2 years. This was the best version of the 3 times that LeVar Christensen ran this bill. This is a bill that's against parental rights. It's elevating grandparent rights over parental rights, and it's creating a second-class citizenship for certain adoptive parents who are adopting relatives. And I said on the Senate floor 3 years in a row, we should not have second-class parents. Every parent in this state should have the same rights. This bill was against parental rights. I stood up for parental rights, and I'm embarrassed that grassroots would mark me down for voting against a bill that was creating a second-class standard of parents. Grassroots either misunderstood this bill or they got this one completely wrong.
Okay, let's go to the issue of the caucus convention system and SB 54. And I know this is going to be hard to keep within 1 minute, but let's do it. Senator Weiler.
Yeah, this is simple. Count My Vote had one goal: eviscerate the caucus. And they were winning when Mitt Romney jumped onto their bandwagon on February 23rd, 2014. Senate Bill 54 was imperfect, but it had one goal: to preserve as much of the caucus as possible. And Senate Bill 54 has done that. I have run under the caucus system 3 times. This time, even though I have my signatures, has been no different. I've been knocking on delegate doors. I've hosted over 15 delegate events. I'm calling delegates. I'm mailing delegates. This has been no different, even though I have my signatures. I believe that without Senate Bill 54, we would have had a direct primary this year.
Heather Gardner.
I disagree. I feel like they didn't have any proof they had all of the signatures. In fact, in some of the rural counties, they did not have the signatures, and some of those signatures were entered into either by false pretension or illegal means. People didn't know what they were signing. As far as the caucus convention system, I very strongly support it, and I am running strictly through the caucus convention system. Granted, if things move forward in the way they are right now, there will be a signature path to the ballot, but I find it ironic that Senator Weiler continuously says he's for the caucus convention system, but if you look at his SB 54 tweets or just Google Senator Weiler and SB 54, he's been the main cheerleader for that, as well as the signature route to the ballot. He's accepted $2,500 from Count My Vote PAC, and in total $6,500 from people to collect his signatures. So I think great that he supports that, but he needs to show that in his actions and what he's lobbying for.
All right, let's move now to the area of the proper role of government, and at the state level even. How far should the state go in regulating? Where do you draw the line on that? And where does personal liberty come into play? And so, Heather Gardner first, please.
Okay, so I believe the proper role of government is to protect the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of its members, as well as private property rights and individual rights, and that ultimately these rights are God-given and cannot be stripped by the government. And as far as regulation goes, I stand by the Republican platform that says we recognize that government regulation can be a major impediment to productivity and competition. We must rely more on market forces and less on government. So I believe that we need to be looking at free market enterprise solutions for things, and that we need to devolve the power down to the smallest local level as well as to the individual.
All right, Senator Weiler.
Thanks. I agree with Heather, and I'd like to elaborate that the proper role of government for the state is different than the federal. The federal should be limited to those specifically enumerated powers that are specifically detailed in the United States Constitution, and all of those other powers have been reserved for the state. So if there is something that does need to be regulated, I would much prefer to do that on the state level, because we're the sovereign state and not on the federal level, and we've gotten that backwards. And one thing that's hard for me to admit as a Republican is there is no free market incentive to be clean in terms of our air and our pollution. The free market incentive is to pollute because you make more money that way. And so that is something that I think that's a limited area where I think the state needs to step in and make sure that all the air that we're breathing is as clean as possible. Unfortunately, the federal government has preempted states' rights in that area, and they're making most of the laws. And so that's something I'd like to see reversed.
Okay, very quickly, one issue, and then I think we'll go to your closing statements that is important to Utah land issues. HB 276 was passed and signed into law, creating a state-level BLM, a Bureau of Land Management, which is DLM, to go into effect in 3 years. Senator Weiler, could you speak to that? And then Heather Gardner, what would be the best ways of getting the land back to the local county?
Well, I think HB 276 was introduced to have something in place so that if we win a lawsuit and we actually get our federal lands back, that there would be something in place. I think, and Sherilyn, I've read your emails on that, and I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you. Mike Noel, who sponsored that bill, I think has been a great champion for getting our federal lands back, and I voted for all of Ken Ivory's bills and the other efforts to fund the lawsuit for federal lands. But if we do get them back, we need to have something in place, and that's what HB 276 does. It created a division of land management in the Department of Natural Resources so that that these lands could be managed. It doesn't take effect until we get at least 100,000 acres of land back transferred from the federal government to the state of Utah. So I think that there has been a lot of overreaction to this, and if HB 276 went too far, we can certainly rein that in next session.
Okay, we've got we have 1.5 minutes actually to the break. Our clock's ticking here.
To the hard break?
Yeah.
Okay. Heather, give us a quick response on that, and then we'll let you each have your minute, and if we have to override, we will.
Okay.
Okay, so I definitely feel this bill went too far in creating the DLM, and I feel like it takes away rights and responsibilities from the local sheriffs. I am not in favor of centralizing any type of power, and so especially in a situation like this, I feel like there wasn't a use at this time for the DLM, and I have concerns that it would become eventually what we've seen the BLM become, and a paramilitarized force and something that takes power outside of its enumerated powers. So let's devolve down to the local sheriffs and to the local landowners rather than creating something more centralized.
Okay, both of you, time now for your closing statements. Heather, go first, please, and stay within the time limit. We'll override so that Todd gets his equal time. Thank you both so much for being with us on this show today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. So I am Heather Gardner. I'm running for State Senate District 23. I would appreciate the delegates' votes on Saturday. And part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I believe that everyday citizens can make a difference. I've been very concerned with the amount of legislation and regulation that we're passing each session and the virtual amount of bills and laws that we're putting into place that change each year. I would like to see us respect constituents, and one of the concerns that's been brought to me is that if there's a difference of opinion, I will treat my constituents in a respectful manner. I will not put them down or make fun of them on social media. I would like to see individuals step forward and make a difference, and if there's something we don't like, become involved. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've loved the opportunity I've had to meet so many delegates and to be involved in the Republican Party. I will stand by conservative values, and I ask you to please vote Heather Gardner on Saturday.
Senator Weiler.
Thanks. I'm running for re-election. I'd like to continue some of the work I've started on the Sixth Amendment, and also on incentivizing more people to be self-reliant and save for their own retirement. I have been described as the most accessible legislator because I answer every email, I respond to every text, I answer my phone when people call me on the Senate floor, and yes, I'm very active on social media. 90% of my colleagues, you can tweet at them, you can Facebook at them, and they don't respond, and I do respond, and so I can be criticized if I've been sarcastic or if I've stood up for something when someone's wrongfully attacked me. That's fine, but the fact that I'm responding is important, and I'm proud of that fact. I'll continue to be engaged, accessible, and accountable if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected. And I'm not afraid to stand up for what's right, whether it's declaring pornography as a public health crisis or preserving the caucus when Count My Vote tried to take it away. I will continue to speak out on issues that I believe in. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Sherilyn and Enoch, and thank you, Heather, for running. The delegates should have a choice.
Thank you both. It's been a great hour. We hope it's been beneficial for the delegates listening.